Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Publishing Dialogue. This week, Pranika and I are here with a very interesting topic that we thought we'll discuss and have a dialogue about rather than having a guest on our show. So, I'm going to turn it over to Pranika to introduce the topic for today before we start our discussion.
Okay, great. Thanks, Akriti. And hi, everyone. Very nice to be doing this. And the topic for today that we're going to be discussing or talking about is the taboo around Mills and Boons books.
Wow.
Yes. So I think my first question that I'm going to sort of throw at the audience as well as at Akriti is that when did you first started reading Mills and Boons?
Wow. When did I first start reading? That's like, oh, such a question. I have to deep dive into my memory. I think I started reading Mills and Boons quite young, um,
Uh-huh.
probably when I was in the seventh standard, 13, 14 maybe,
Oh
around that
wow,
time.
yeah, that's young.
Yeah, I think Mills and Boons was my first foray into like romance reading.
Yes,
That's
that's
kind of
right.
how, that not intense, but they're very cheesy kind of romantic stories. That's kind
Yes.
of, I think Mills and Boons is the culprit to have me hooked into romance. As I think I've announced so many times on Saga's platform, I'm a huge romance reader. So it began with Mills and Boons. And thinking of the stigma actually, how I started was no one introduced me to Mills and Boons. I used to go to a library next to my house, back in the day, borrowing books from a library, getting
We
recommended.
used to read books from a library, that's right.
So I went to the library and they had like a corridor, and at the end of the corridor, tucked away in a secret corner, was rows of Mills and Boons, and they were all color coordinated, from the different series because Mills and Boons does that when they're publishing their covers. You have the blue
That's right.
series, you have red, you have teal, you have pink, you have I don't know how many more. You even have a black one, I believe.
Yes, that's right. You
So
do.
imagine all of those and so beautifully color coordinated. And I'm sure the owner shared a passion of Mills and Boons with me because the rest of the library was in shambles. All right, there was no coordination whatsoever. Books were haywire. Young adult was next to horror. Like there was no header tales to the library.
Yeah, there was no like genre organization
Yes,
or any
no
of
genre
that.
organization. But Mills and Bones
Right.
section was super coordinated. And I was excited to pick those up and read them. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. And lo and behold, I never got out of it. I still read quite a lot of Mills and Bones and still love buying them according to the color. I think great tip there, Mills and Boons, what they do, they're publishing. Love that. But I think that really talks about the stigma because I was very nervous to take those. And I thought at that young age that they're extremely racy. And for a 14-year-old, it's
Yeah,
something adult to be read. And,
that is
covers
true.
were also a little bit, risque. So you would want to choose the covers where only
Yes,
like a girl
correct.
was there or the man was there. And they
Correct.
weren't like an embrace. But that's kind
Yes, I mean, coming to the covers actually, it
of,
was because I was introduced to Mills and Boons by my mother, which
oh,
is a shock.
that's so amazing. That's actually so lovely to know because usually it's like I said, it's kind of like a secret, but here
Uh-huh,
is your
uh-huh.
mom introducing you to these
Yes.
books. That's so
But I mean, because she had that bit where she read it in secret, when where she didn't want people to know that people are, she's reading Mills and Boons because, well, the covers are not something that you'd show, especially to like family. Like, it's not something that you display outright that, oh, I'm reading. And it's not, I mean, well, to be honest, just it wasn't considered serious reading.
yes,
In fact,
very
it still isn't. And I think that's the taboo that surrounds Mills and Boons is that it's not content that is supposed to be consumed or is educational in any way or, you know.
even the literary world considers it trash literature to
Yeah,
be extremely
exactly.
crude and to be honest, bluntly, they call it trash romance. You
That's
don't
right.
consider it to belong in the Romance Hall of Fame.
That's right.
Considering the fact that commercial fiction itself is by the literary world considered okay, no,
Mhm.
not real reading. And in the commercial world, in the commercial fiction world, they segregate it further by putting Mills and Boons on the lower scale.
Those,
Which
yes,
is
that's
quite
right.
unfair. Why
It
does it have to
is.
earn this stigma?
That's true. And while I mean, it's good writing, it's romance at its best, to be very honest. I mean, boy meets girl, lots of obstacles, falls in love, and they have a happy ending. What more do you need for a romance reader? That's like heaven. So, I mean, and they have garnered a great audience to have been going on for so many years. I mean, it's a feat on their part as well. So clearly there are readers out there, but they have to like sort of hide and say, "Oh no, I'm reading something on the side as well," which is actual literature. I mean, I read only Mills and Boons, and that's actual literature as well sometimes.
Literature. But I think, to play like the devil's advocate, what does happen is, for people who kind of have moved on from the phase of Mills and Boons, because I don't for a second believe people who are criticizing Mills and Boons have never read them. They've 100% read them. You've had that phase, but why you've kind of moved on, or you look down upon it, is because it does have a bit of a formulaic writing style. The plot is quite, like you said, girl meets boy, obstacles, and then obviously a happy ending. And even to go further, if you dissect it, because obviously we've read so many Mills and Boons, we've seen the similarities in plot. You've always got your the hero, the male protagonist, being like a Greek magnate, or being like a business Italian tycoon, a businessman. They're from
Yeah.
all over Europe, spread out across Greece, Italy, Spain, and you've got your female protagonist being extremely moral, with high values, always doing some sort of charity, and never being in the wrong, kind of
Yes,
being
that's
vulnerable,
right.
and
That's
always kind of hiding her true identity, and waiting for the male protagonist to recognize her for the goodness that she is. And they're always somehow, more often than not, in the very typical Mills and Boons, the girl is always poor and the man is always rich. It's
yes, that's right.
what it is. And more often than not, they sleep together, they get pregnant, and then there's a marriage of convenience, or they're forced to be the mistress, or
That's
there's
true.
blackmail involved, and then suddenly you're falling in love with the blackmailer. It's very I can blindly recite a Mills and Boons, because I've
Yeah.
read so many of them. I can understand the writing pattern. So that
They're
is where
very
criticism comes
specific.
in.
Correct, yeah, they're very, very specific tropes that they follow. But I mean, to sort of counteract that point, I would say that they are, I mean, they've expanded a lot. Like the Black series that they have, the Nocturne line, as they call it, is that has those werewolves and vampires and a lot of like these creatures that you don't usually read about in any other romance book. And now they're also looking at LGBTQ and chicklet romance, which is something very new and very different. So while there is that sort of you'll have your old school tropes of marriage of convenience and Greek tycoon marries formidable love, whichever that is.
No, that's an actual title. 100%, that's an actual title. That's actually, I mean, not to jump too quickly from your point, but
Uh-huh.
yes, they've definitely got inclusion right now, and they're catering to all the audiences. You have the ones who love Christian romances. They have a huge, huge section for those traditional readers, as well as readers like you and me, who like the typical,
Yeah, exactly.
modern desire series. Plus, obviously, the LGBTQ community is being addressed now. They're not overlooking it. And for someone as traditional as Mills and Boons, just for them to recognize the need to have such literature, I think is great. It means that they're not closed off. They are
Yes,
constantly
exactly.
evolving and moving on. Otherwise, they would definitely be pegged as super old school and really be part of the cancel culture.
Yeah,
If they
that's
weren't
right.
moving on. But I think what was also interesting is the titles. That since you said Greek
Yes.
god marries whatever formidable princess, it really got me thinking that titles are the typical ones are actually very almost non-feminist in a way, because it's
Yes.
always like the virgin secret, or royal prince marries commoner, or his forbidden mistress. There's literally, I'm just reading books of my library at this point. There's really these kind of titles being released in 2021, which
Yes.
really gets me thinking, with so many people being vocal on social media about feminism, and just women empowerment, and so many other topics being included
Equality. Yeah.
in media and culture. We don't actively see Mills and Boons be a part of that, and yet they are kind of protected from that criticism, or I think they're protected. I don't see a lot against them, which I'm happy about. But at the same time, I do feel the titles could really use some rework.
Yes, I do agree. I feel like, I mean, there's something I read recently, very recently about Mills and Boons, was that while they have such titles and they have, there's always a feminist debate around Mills and Boons being, not having, giving women that equality that's usually there. But at the same time, you look at any Mills and Boons and you see there's so much power that is given to a female. There's so much like, if you look at the protagonist and if you look at the heroine, and she's given like, she's almost driving the plot. She's like, there are some new ones where they have the females being businesswomen and being, traveling and meeting these
Correct, correct.
Greek tycoons and things like
Yeah.
that. Yes. Which is, I mean, the story is, while the titles are a little bit old school, the stories are evolving and giving women that sort of power.
I
So,
think that's a excellent point actually, which also talks about the inclusion thing that we were speaking about earlier. That there is, like we said, a little bit for everyone. Definitely, the titles are moving on for even heterosexual romances to not be very like, oh, I'm a girl, save me, kind of like what do you call that? Woman in distress kind of a vibe. Prince save me, Prince Charming on a horse. Like that's what they did earlier. But now, more often than not, their books definitely show both partners being on the equal spectrum. You have, a lot of times office romances where both are in equal terms of power. It's not just like your typical assistant boss kind of love story. But I think what they're yet to branch out on is definitely where they reverse the tables with the woman being the boss and being the main person in charge, being the tycoon, the Italian tycoon, the Greek tycoon, whatnot, and forcing the male protagonist to be
correct.
either it's a marriage of convenience or you're blackmailing the person because his brother or sister has cheated you. Like these are all the plots where the females are always in the other end
In
of the
the
spectrum.
wrong, in a way. Like,
The
they're
wrong,
always, yeah,
yeah. But you
that's
never
right.
see, while they are doing, like you said, the boardroom things and
Hmm.
women being having those kind of
Those
jobs,
roles.
not
Hmm.
those roles, but they are still missing to turn it all around completely. I think I'm still waiting to see that. I hope they do that very, very soon for sure. But like we said, they do definitely stick to all audiences. They're not alienating anyone, whether they're in the wrong or right, which I think in a way, it speaks of a really old school kind of testament, because you are kind of stuck to your ways while exploring and taking in the society that is moving forward, whether society may agree or not agree. There are parts of society that are definitely supporting them, and they want to cater to those while pacify the ones who are against them, which I think is a great feat.
It is definitely, and I mean, I feel like that we're discussing the taboo behind Mills and Boons. Talking about it, it's sort of wearing off a little bit because women, I mean, well, honestly, Mills and Boons are almost like an escapist dream or escapist fantasy for most women. I mean, it's like, I want to read a Mills and Boons because I want to relax. I want to sort of shut out my actual life and read the bits about the
Correct.
fantasy or the everyone having a happy ending bits. So it's while that is happening, it is an escapist, but at the same time, the language is improving. There's bits about even new sort of generational ideas and techniques and technologies that they're sort of putting into the way that
Yeah,
they
the
edit, they
choice.
write, how it's coming
Mhm.
across. Yeah, and even covers, in fact, because I think that's a big embarrassing point for a lot of readers. Which is why, and covers too, that I mean, now we have more animated covers that they're diving into. So I think that's very interesting to look at. Like that stick, while there is a stigma, and while there are still people that who are not comfortable outrightly telling people that I am reading a Mills and Boons. There are, on the same side, there are people who are being vocal about it and who are outrightly saying that, you know what, I am reading a Mills and Boons and it's fine. It's what
Yeah, it's
it,
great.
yeah, it makes up for most of my library. Like I tell people, it makes up for most of my
Yeah.
library.
It truly does. And I mean, that's the entire point, that while you said about the escapist route, it is meant to be escapist. And at the end of the day, literature is meant to be enjoyed. It's you want to keep going back to it. That's what it's supposed to do, whether it's intense, whether it's lighthearted. If you don't feel the need or the want to go back to it, then it's kind of maybe failing to do its job that well. It's not keeping you engaged enough. And with Mills and Boons, with MNBs, that's never the problem. They always have you coming back for more. And that's
Definitely.
kudos to them with their storylines and their storytelling, even if it may seem archaic and it may seem repetitive. But that's what keeps readers going. And that's why that stigma is, also part of the fact that literally snobs do think that writing and storylines should always be original. Like,
Yeah,
why can we not
that's
be inspired from
uh,
the same kind of storylines, or just have the same kind of plots be retold in different ways? I don't see the harm in that.
yeah, for sure. I mean, there are some rules to romance as well. Like, if you, I mean, any romance publication or a person reading a romance would want that happy ending. While there is that bit that, oh, maybe you don't make people go together because it's not. That's not what happens in real life, but I'm not reading it because I want to know what happens in real life.
Exactly. Real life is difficult anyway. We don't want to read that in our books. That's not why you pick up a romance book. You want a happy ending. I mean, kudos to the books who have non-happy endings. That's absolutely fine. Makes sense to your storyline. But in a Mills and Boons, that doesn't make sense. Their storylines have to have happy endings. You cannot be like, oh, but they're always so typical, and they always have happy endings. That's ridiculous. They're meant to have happy endings. If you don't want a happy ending, then maybe choose another book series to read. Don't read M&B. But I think what is also interesting about, this point just came in my mind. A lot of the stories that I've read are heterosexual romances, and again, very typical, those typical storylines: girl meets boy, rich man, whatever type of woman. But they have a lot of these books deal with infertility, and infertility from the woman's point of view, from the man's point of view, from
Oh,
both
that's
partners
interesting.
being a problem. And it's very lightly touched upon. It's not something super intricate, but it is part of the plot. And they don't have happy endings there. I've read quite a few books where it doesn't end with the woman getting miraculously pregnant just because they've finally gotten together. It's, they go into adoption, or they go into surrogacy, or they decide not to have kids, and they're happy just being the two of them. I've seen quite a few of Mills and Boons like this, which I thought was very interesting when I first read it, because you would think a traditional ending involves, the husband, wife, and two kids. That's what people think, that you want that. But Mills and Boons doesn't always do that. You have ones where they start with the fact that, oh, infertility was the issue that broke them up. And at the end, they're together, but infertility still exists. It's not like a magic boon attached, which the book is just automatically erasing, which I think is definitely quite interesting.
I mean, given how, as I said, it's progressing according to the time and demand, what's very important that Mills and Boons does is they see what the readers want.
Yeah.
Somewhere there's that bit that's coming in that, okay, they want to read these sort of plots and ideas, and that's when they take those up. Definitely.
That is true. And I think they also have a little bit of a stigma of being labeled as erotic, but not having erotic content. I think on the flip side, people see them as being extremely, how do I say, extremely plain.
Fluff.
Yeah, like
Yes,
extremely
like
flat.
it's
Yes. Like
fluff,
people,
yes.
like hardcore erotic readers, and just people
Yeah.
fans of that genre will
Uh-huh.
think that Mills and Bones is supposed to be erotic, and then look down upon the sex scenes when it's not supposed to be erotic. That's, it's a out and out romance novel, and a romance novella, and the minimal sex scenes, I would say, compared to what the erotic genre is now capable of doing and is, improving leaps and bounds. It's definitely Mills and Boons doesn't come in that category. It kind of floats. I feel that's another thing that the stigma is there for Mills and Boons. It's created a category of its own because
Yes, that's right.
romance
It
readers,
has.
romance doesn't want to include. You have your comedy romance, you have your contemporary romance, you have Nicholas Sparks romance. Mills and Boons is not really included in that, and neither is it an erotic genre. It's like Mills and Boons is its own genre, you know.
Right, it is its own genre, and I mean because it has a very specific way of it being told as well. Like even the writing style is very specific and sort of molded to be within that
Correct.
genre. So
Correct.
yeah, and I mean as you said, there is a stigma around erotica as a whole. I
Hmm.
mean that's always the case,
Yes.
but at the same time, I mean
I feel that is a topic for that's a
some other
huge
time.
topic to dive into, the stigma around the erotic genre and the fact that people think erotic genres don't have plots. I feel that should be the topic for our
One
next.
topic that we'll discuss
Yeah.
again. Yes, for
We
sure.
had a great discussion about the stigma of Mills and Boons and just about Mills and Boons in general, their storytelling, their kind of formula, and just how they're progressing, really. And that was great. I think for the audience that is listening and that is watching this, I hope we gave you some food for thought. And please definitely put down your
Yes.
thoughts in the comments. We want to
Please
spark
do. Yeah.
discussion. We want to know what you think. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree? Do you hate Mills and Boons? Do you love them? Just what do you think? Tell us.
Yes. Tell us in the comments, and we'd be very happy to respond to what other people have to say. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and listening to us rant a little bit about Mills and Boots.
It was definitely a dream come true for us. Great. Thank you, everyone.